The sharp tang of cheap liquor and stale sweat filled the air inside the dimly lit tavern on the fringes of Nova Colony. Tevin slouched over the battered bar, his rough hands gripping a glass of amber liquid tightly. A deep scar ran down the length of his weathered face, becoming more pronounced in the flicker of the neon sign outside, a reminder of battles long fought and lost. He took a swig, savoring the burn as it slid down his throat. Behind the bar, an old bartender with mechanical eyes and cybernetic implants shot a tired glance at Tevin before returning to cleaning a set of grimy glasses. Tevin let out a grunt, sliding his empty glass forward. "Another," he muttered. The bartender's artificial eye focused on him with a faint whirring sound. "You sure that's a good idea?" "You've been here since sundown," he said cautiously. Tevin's hand instinctively moved toward the holster at his waist, fingers brushing the worn grip of his blaster. "I didn't ask for your opinion, old man. Just pour the drink." The tension between them hung heavy in the air for a moment before the bartender shrugged and reached for the bottle. "Your credits, your funeral," he muttered as he poured the amber liquid into the glass. The rusted door of the bar screeched open, cutting through the silence like nails on a chalkboard. Tevin turned, hands still near his weapon, only to freeze when he saw who had entered. A woman stumbled through the entrance, her sapphire blue skin shimmering with a light sheen of sweat. Silver hair, tangled and matted, framed her face, partially obscuring eyes that glowed with a strange violet hue in the low light. In her arms, she cradled a small, squirming bundle. Tevin's breath hitched as recognition flickered. Asaran. He hadn't seen one of her kind in years. Shoving the memory aside, he forced himself to focus on the present. Her eyes scanned the room with desperate urgency, locking on a Tevin with something like hope glimmering faintly behind the fear. She staggered toward him, unsteady but resolute. "You," she rasped, her voice carrying the musical cadence of her people. "You look like a man who can help." Tevin turned back to his drink, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. But the woman persisted, sliding onto the stool beside him with surprising grace despite her disheveled state. "Please," she whispered, leaning closer. The scent of ozone and something distinctly alien washed over him. "My son and I need protection. I can offer myself in exchange for your help." Tevin choked on his drink, sputtering. "Lady, I don't know what kind of place you think this is, but—" His words caught in his throat as he met her gaze. The raw desperation in her violet eyes stirred something deep within him, something he had long thought dead. His attention shifted to the bundle in her arms. A pair of wide, innocent eyes peered out at him from beneath the folds of cloth. He cursed under his breath, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "Look," he muttered, "I don't get involved in other people's problems, especially not ones that come with complications." Her lips curled into a sad smile. "I'm NEA, and this is my son, Kiran. We've crossed galaxies, fleeing a war that could wipe out my people. You're our last hope." Tevin scoffed. "Last hope? Lady, I'm nobody's hope. I'm just a washed-up soldier trying to forget the past." NEA's hand shot out, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "Then you know the price of survival. Please, just listen." Tevin looked down at her hand, then back to her face. He should walk away, tell her to find someone else to play the hero. But something in the way she cradled her child made him pause. "Fine," he growled, signaling to the bartender. "But we're going to need something stronger for this conversation." As the bartender set down 2 glasses of thick green liquid, NEA began her story. She spoke of a galaxy torn apart by ancient grudges and ambitious warlords, and of the Sarans, her people, caught in the crossfire. "Kiran is more than just my son," she said softly. "He carries within him the key to our survival, a genetic memory that holds the last hope for our species." Tevin listened, his face impassive, though his mind churned. It was the kind of story he might have dismissed, if not for the sincerity in NEA's voice and the quiet weight of the child resting in her arms. "So, what do you want from me?" Tevin asked, leaning back in his seat. "You want me to play bodyguard to the savior of your people?" NEA's gaze fell to her untouched drink. "I want a chance at survival. And in exchange, I offer myself as your concubine. It is the Saran way when seeking protection from a warrior of renown." Tevin raised an eyebrow. Warrior of renown? I don't know what stories you've heard, but I'm no hero. Just a man who's done terrible things to survive. You're Tevin Oren, Nia said, her voice quiet but firm. The man who held the line at Nexus 5. Tevin flinched at the mention of that cursed battle, memories of screaming soldiers and burning skies rising to the surface. He clenched his fists. That man is dead. He died with the others on that battlefield. Nia's hand rested on his again, her touch gentle. No, he's right here, drowning in guilt and memories, but he's alive. You may not believe it, but to us, you could be salvation. Tevin met her gaze, seeing the strength and determination that had carried her this far. He glanced down at Kiran, the child's peaceful face a stark contrast to the turmoil in his mind. Could he really turn them away? Damn it, he muttered, downing the rest of his drink. I must be out of my mind. Nia's eyes brightened with hope. Does that mean? It means I'll help you. Tevin cut in, his voice gruff. But let's get one thing straight. This isn't a fairy tale. I'm not your hero, and I'm sure as hell not taking you as a concubine. A flush of blue darkened Nia's cheeks. It's our custom, she explained. A bond of protection. Tevin raised a hand to stop her. Save it. We're doing this my way. You and the kid need a safe place? Fine. But that's where it ends. No bonds. No intimacy. Got it? Nia nodded, though Tevin could see a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. Understood. Thank you, Tevin. You have no idea what this means to us. Yeah, well, Tevin muttered, tossing credits onto the bar. Don't thank me yet. As they made their way to the door, the bartender called out, You sure you know what you're getting into, soldier? Tevin paused, a wry smile pulling at his lips. Not a clue. But since when has that ever stopped me? With that, he led Nia and Kiran out into the neon-lit streets of the colony, the cool night air sobering him slightly. My place isn't far, he said, scanning the shadows. Stay close and keep the kid quiet. Nia clutched Kiran tightly to her chest, following Tevin through the dark streets. As they walked, Tevin couldn't shake the feeling that he had just signed up for something far more dangerous than a simple protection job. I must be out of my damn mind, he muttered. Nia's soft voice drifted on the wind. Or perhaps you're finally finding it again. Tevin grunted, but couldn't help the small spark of something long buried, stirring inside him. Tevin leaned against the doorframe of his cramped apartment, watching Nia as she settled Kiran down on the worn-out bed. The room was small, barely enough space for two, let alone three, but Nia moved with a calm efficiency that belied her earlier desperation. Her violet eyes softened as she tucked the child under a fraying blanket. Kiran's breathing soon evened out, the rhythmic rise and fall of his small chest offering the only sound in the otherwise oppressive silence. Tevin's thoughts raced. He didn't know why he'd agreed to help them. The life he'd carved out after the war was solitary, bitter, and comfortable in its misery. Taking in a woman and child, especially a Saran on the run from some galactic conflict, that wasn't part of the plan. He sighed, rubbing a hand over the rough stubble on his chin. Nia finished her task, then turned to face him. In the dim light of the single flickering bulb overhead, her silver hair shimmered like liquid metal. Her gaze, always intense, locked onto his, and for a moment, Tevin felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible but heavy with gratitude. Tevin shrugged, looking away. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen this neighborhood after dark. He pushed off the doorframe and crossed the room, pulling a chair over to the small table in the corner. The chair creaked as he sat, his large frame too much for the flimsy furniture. Sit down. Let's talk about what exactly you're running from. Nia hesitated, but eventually crossed the room and took the seat opposite him. For a few moments, the two just stared at each other, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. Tevin broke the silence. You said Kiran carries something important, he asked, folding his arms. A genetic memory or something? What exactly are we dealing with here? Nia took a breath, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them in her lap. The Saran people have a unique ability, she began. Our ancestors encoded their knowledge, their memories, into our DNA. Every generation carries the collective history of our people. The things we've learned, the battles we've fought, the wisdom of centuries, it's all passed down. But Kiran, her voice faltered for a moment. Kiran carries something more, a memory not just of our past, but a key to our future. Tevin's brow furrowed. A key. NEA nodded. It's a piece of knowledge, a way to reshape things, to ensure our survival against those who would see us destroyed. Kiran is the last living connection to that knowledge. That's why they're hunting us. Why they'll never stop. Tevin leaned back, his chair groaning under the shift in weight. And who exactly are they? NEA's expression darkened, her eyes flickering with an intensity that almost made Tevin flinch. They call themselves the Dominion, she said quietly, as though speaking the name might summon them from the stars. A coalition of warlords and political factions that have grown too powerful. They've been expanding, wiping out anyone in their path. The Sarans resisted, tried to stay neutral, but the Dominion doesn't take kindly to defiance. Tevin had heard of the Dominion. Every soldier worth his blaster had. They were ruthless, an empire built on the bones of those who stood against them. And they're after Kiran because of what he knows? Yes. And if they capture him, her voice broke, but she quickly composed herself, straightening in her chair. If they get their hands on him, the Saran people will cease to exist. They'll use that knowledge to wipe us out for good. Tevin was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. His gaze drifted toward the closed bedroom door, behind which Kiran slept peacefully, unaware of the galaxy-sized target painted on his back. So, you want me to help you hide? Tevin said at last, more a statement than a question. For now, NEA agreed. But eventually, we'll need to fight back. We can't run forever. Fighting back isn't exactly my specialty anymore. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. You picked the wrong guy if you're looking for someone to go up against the Dominion. NEA's eyes didn't waver. I don't believe that. Tevin grunted, shaking his head. Well, believe what you want, but I'm no hero. Not anymore. You keep saying that. NEA replied softly, her voice gentle but firm. But I don't think it's the truth. Before Tevin could respond, a sudden knock at the door made them both freeze. Tevin's hand instinctively shot to the blaster holstered at his side. NEA stiffened, eyes wide with fear as she glanced toward the bedroom. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a low voice. Tevin Oren, open up. Tevin stood slowly, drawing his weapon. He motioned for NEA to stay back as he approached the door. His heart pounded in his chest, but his grip on the blaster remained steady. He hadn't expected trouble this soon, but he'd be damned if he was caught off guard. Another knock, more insistent now. I know you're in there, Tevin. Open the door before things get ugly. Tevin cursed under his breath, unlocking the door and yanking it open with his blaster raised. Standing on the threshold was a tall figure, cloaked in shadow. Their face was obscured by the hood of a long, dark coat, but Tevin caught the glint of a familiar insignia on their chest, a Dominion emblem. Well, this is a surprise, the stranger said, stepping forward without fear, as though the blaster aimed at their head was an afterthought. Looks like I found myself a ghost. Tevin's stomach sank as recognition hit him. The figure pulled back their hood, revealing a scarred face, much like his own, and a pair of cold, calculating eyes. Hello, old friend, the man said with a twisted smile. We've got unfinished business. Tevin's grip tightened on the blaster, his pulse quickening as he stared at the man standing in his doorway. He hadn't seen that scarred face in years, but there was no mistaking it. Cade Varek. They'd served together during the Nexus War, back when Tevin still believed in something. Cade had been a sharpshooter, one of the best, but the man standing before him now wasn't the same soldier Tevin had known. His once bright eyes were cold, hard, and a Dominion insignia glinted ominously on his chest. Cade's smile widened as he saw the recognition in Tevin's face. You gonna lower that thing? Or are you planning to shoot your old buddy? Tevin didn't move. I'm thinking about it. The tension between them crackled, both men standing frozen in the doorway. NEA shifted behind Tevin, her violet eyes wide with fear, but she remained silent. Cade chuckled, his gaze flicking briefly over Tevin's shoulder. Who's your new friend, Tevin? Don't tell me you've gone soft, taking in strays. Why are you here, Kate? Tevin growled, ignoring the jab. You didn't track me down just for a chat. Cade raised his hands in a mock gesture of surrender. No need to be hostile. I'm just here on business. The Dominion's business, to be exact. Tevin's jaw tightened. He had expected trouble, but not this. Not someone from his past. Someone who knew him, knew what he was capable of. Business, huh? Tevin's voice was low, dangerous. You work for them now? Cade shrugged. It's a good gig. Steady pay, plenty of action. You should try it sometime. Better than wasting away in a dump like this. His eyes gleamed with amusement as he glanced around the dingy apartment. I gotta say, this isn't what I pictured for you, Stormbreaker. The name hit Tevin like a punch to the gut. Stormbreaker, the man who held the line at Nexus Prime, the soldier who defied the odds. But that man was long gone. Tevin had buried him along with everyone else who fell in that cursed battle. Don't call me that, Tevin muttered, his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger. What do you want? Cade's smile faded, and his expression turned serious. I'm looking for a woman. Saran, silver hair, travels with a kid. Dominion's got a big bounty on them. Seems they're carrying something valuable, something the higher-ups want. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Tevin's stomach clenched. He didn't answer, but his silence was enough to give him away. Cade's eyes narrowed. So, you do know them. Should have figured. Always had a soft spot for lost causes, didn't you? You need to leave, Cade, Tevin said, his voice tight. Now! Come on, Tev. Cade's tone softened, as though they were still friends. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need the woman and the kid. Hand them over, and I'll be on my way. No one has to get hurt. Tevin shook his head, stepping forward to block Cade's view of NEA. That's not happening. Cade sighed, as if disappointed. I was hoping you'd say that. In one swift motion, he reached for his blaster, but Tevin was faster. He lunged forward, slamming Cade against the doorframe, the two of them grappling for control. Blows were exchanged, hard and brutal, the confined space amplifying the intensity of their struggle. Tevin landed a punch to Cade's ribs, but Cade countered with a knee to Tevin's gut, forcing him back. You always were stubborn, Cade spat, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. He leveled his blaster at Tevin, but before he could fire, a soft whirring sound filled the air. A shot rang out, and Cade froze, his eyes wide in shock. Tevin followed his gaze to see Amy standing behind him, her trembling hands gripping a small, compact blaster. The faint smell of ozone lingered in the air as Cade slumped to the ground, clutching his side where the shot had hit. NEA's breathing was ragged, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I'm sorry, she whispered, lowering the weapon. Tevin stared at her, then down at Cade, who lay groaning on the floor, his blaster slipping from his hand. He'd been shot, but the wound wasn't fatal. Yet. Should have guessed the girl could shoot, Cade grunted, coughing weakly. Guess I'm not walking away from this one. Tevin stepped over Cade, his eyes cold. You made your choice, Cade. You could have been on the right side of this, Cade muttered, his voice fading as the pain overtook him. The Dominion's gonna find her, Tevin. You can't protect them forever. Tevin knelt, grabbing Cade's collar and yanking him closer. If the Dominion comes, I'll be ready, he growled. Then, with a swift motion, he slammed Cade's head into the floor, knocking him unconscious. He stood, breathing heavily, and turned to NEA. She was pale, still clutching the blaster as though it might disappear if she let go. Pack your things, Tevin said, his voice hard. We're leaving. Now! NEA nodded, quickly moving to gather what little they had. Tevin checked Cade's pulse, still alive, but out cold. They didn't have much time. Cade was right about one thing. The Dominion wouldn't stop. They'd keep coming until they found NEA and Kiran. As Tevin strapped on his blaster and grabbed a few supplies, he glanced out the small, grime-covered window. The streets of the colony lay quiet under the neon glow. But for how long? His eyes flicked toward the sleeping child in the other room. Kiran. He hadn't signed up for this, but it was too late to back out now. He was in deep, and there was no going back. Let's move, Tevin said, opening the door. We'll figure out the next step on the way. As they slipped into the shadows, Tevin couldn't help but feel the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders once again. The war he thought he'd left behind was waiting for him, and this time it was personal. Tevin and Anna moved swiftly through the dimly lit streets of the colony, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. The neon lights flickered above them, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls of the dilapidated buildings. Tevin led the way, his senses alert, constantly scanning for any sign of trouble. Nia followed closely, her silver hair tucked into a loose bun, her violet eyes darting nervously from side to side. Kiran, still cradled in her arms, slept soundly, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. Tevin's mind raced as he tried to think of a safe place to lay low. "Do you have any safe houses or contacts?" Tevin asked over his shoulder, his voice low and urgent. Nia shook her head. "Not here. We've been on the run for too long. I hope to find somewhere safe once we got to this sector," but her voice trailed off, her gaze filled with regret. Tevin cursed under his breath. "Great. So we're improvising." They rounded a corner, and Tevin spotted an old warehouse in the distance. It was run down, its windows boarded up, but it looked secure enough. "We'll use that," he said, pointing toward the building. "It's not perfect, but it should be safe enough for the time being." Nia nodded, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. They approached the warehouse cautiously, and Tevin led the way through a side door that was slightly ajar. The interior was dark and musty, but it was spacious and provided the cover they needed. Tevin motioned for Nia to stay back while he checked the place for any immediate threats. He moved through the shadows, his blaster at the ready, his eyes scanning every corner of the warehouse. After a thorough sweep, he gave Nia the all-clear. "This'll do for now," Tevin said, setting down his gear and pulling out a small, portable light source. The dim light revealed the grimy floor and the scattered debris that littered the space. "Make yourself and the kid comfortable. I'll start setting up some defenses." Nia placed Kiran gently on a makeshift bed of old blankets she'd found in a corner, then began to unpack what few supplies they had. Tevin worked in silence, securing the doors and windows with whatever materials he could find. He rigged a simple alarm system using old sensors and wires, hoping it would give him a warning if anyone tried to get inside. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him. Cade's visit had been a stark reminder of how dangerous their situation was. The Dominion would not stop. They would come, and when they did, Tevin needed to be ready. Once he finished, he joined Nia by Kiran's makeshift bed. She was humming softly, her voice barely audible but soothing. Tevin watched her for a moment, noting the weariness in her eyes and the tight grip she had on her small blaster. "Look, I know this isn't what you expected," Tevin said quietly. "I didn't plan for any of this either. But we're in it now, and we have to make the best of it." Nia looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and concern. "Thank you for helping us. I know this isn't easy for you." Tevin shrugged, trying to dismiss the weight of her words. "It's not about what's easy. It's about doing what's right." They were interrupted by the soft, high-pitched cry of Kiran. Anne immediately moved to the child, her face softening as she picked him up and began to soothe him. Tevin watched the scene, feeling an unexpected pang of empathy. It was hard not to see the child as a symbol of hope, something pure and innocent amid the chaos. "Get some rest," Tevin said, feeling awkward but sincere. "I'll take the first watch." Nia nodded, her exhaustion evident. She settled back on the blankets, Kiran cradled in her arms as she tried to get some sleep. Tevin sat near the entrance, his back against a wall, his eyes alert as he monitored the makeshift alarm system and listened for any sounds of intrusion. The hours passed slowly, and the silence of the warehouse was occasionally broken by the distant hum of the colony's machinery and the occasional scurrying of small creatures outside. Tevin's mind drifted back to the Nexus War, to the battles and the comrades he'd lost. The pain was always there, a constant reminder of a past he couldn't escape. As dawn approached, Tevin's thoughts were interrupted by a faint noise, a series of soft, deliberate footsteps approaching the warehouse. He stiffened, his hand moving instinctively to his blaster. He glanced at Nia, who was still sleeping, and then checked the alarms. They were silent, which meant whoever was coming was skilled at bypassing security. Tevin moved quietly to the entrance, peering through a small crack in the door. The figure that emerged from the shadows was cloaked in a dark robe, their face hidden. Tevin's heart pounded as he prepared himself for a confrontation. The figure approached the door and, to Tevin's surprise, knocked gently. "Tevin Oren?" The voice was calm, almost melodic, but unmistakable. "It's Ava. I need to speak with you." Tevin hesitated. Ava? The name was familiar, but didn't immediately connect with his current situation. He knew Ava from the intelligence networks, someone who had once been an ally. But why would she be here now? And how did she know he was in this sector? He carefully opened the door a crack, peering at the figure outside. "What are you doing here?" Ava stepped into the dim light, her face illuminated by the faint glow from Tevin's portable light. Her expression was tense, but determined, her eyes scanning the interior of the warehouse before meeting Tevin's gaze. "I didn't think I'd find you here," Ava said, her voice steady. "But it seems I was right. We need to talk." Tevin's eyes narrowed, but he stepped aside to let her enter. "Make it quick. I'm on edge, and the last thing I need right now is unexpected visitors." Ava nodded, her gaze briefly settling on NEA and Kiran before returning to Tevin. "I understand. I came because I have information that could be crucial to your situation." Tevin crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "Go on." Ava took a deep breath, her eyes serious. The Dominion's interest in NEA and Kiran is more than just a bounty. They're looking for something specific, an artifact of immense value that NEA carries. It's not just about them, it's about what they have. Tevin's brow furrowed. "An artifact? What kind of artifact?" Ava shook her head. "I don't have all the details, but it's ancient and tied to the Ains' history. The Dominion believes it holds the key to something significant, something that could shift the balance of power in their favor. NEA's people have been protecting it for generations, but now the Dominion is desperate to get their hands on it." Tevin looked at NEA, who was still holding Kiran, her expression unreadable. "You're saying the Dominion is after more than just NEA and her child. They want whatever she's carrying." Ava nodded. "Exactly. And they're not the only ones. There are other factions interested in the artifact as well. If the Dominion can't get it, others will be willing to go to great lengths to obtain it." Tevin's jaw tightened. "So, what's your stake in this? Why are you helping us?" Ava's eyes softened. "I have my own reasons. I've been tracking the Dominion's movements, and when I learned they were after NEA, I knew I had to act. I've seen too many innocent lives caught in the crossfire of their greed. I want to help." Tevin studied her for a moment, weighing her words. "And what makes you think you can help?" "I have resources and connections," Ava said. "I can provide you with information, a safe route to a more secure location, and, if necessary, assistance in dealing with the Dominion and other threats." Tevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, but if you're here to help, then you need to know that we're not just running from the Dominion. We're trying to find a way to keep Kiran and the artifacts safe. If you're in this, you're in it all the way." Ava's expression hardened with resolve. "I understand. I'm committed to helping you protect them." Tevin glanced at NEA, who had finally stirred and was now sitting up, her eyes fixed on Ava with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "NEA, this is Ava. She's here to offer assistance. She might be our best chance at staying ahead of the Dominion." NEA nodded, though her wariness was evident. "Thank you, Ava. But we've been betrayed before. How do I know we can trust you?" Ava met her gaze steadily. "Trust is hard to come by in times like these. But I assure you, my goal is to help you and your child. The Dominion's threats are real, and if we don't act quickly, they will find us." Tevin turned back to Ava. "So, what's the plan?" Ava's eyes flickered with determination. "First, we need to get out of this sector. The Dominion's forces are closing in, and staying here is too risky. I have a safe house, a hidden location where we can regroup and reassess our situation." Tevin nodded, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the tension. "All right, let's move. We don't have much time." As they prepared to leave, Tevin couldn't shake the feeling that their situation was more precarious than ever. The stakes were high, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. But for now, they had a chance, thanks to Ava's unexpected arrival. They gathered their things quickly, and Tevin led the way as they left the warehouse. The streets of the colony were still, the only sounds their footsteps and the distant hum of machinery. Tevin's mind raced with plans and contingencies as he guided them through the labyrinthine alleys and back streets, heading towards Ava's safe house. The journey was tense, each shadow and sound setting Tevin on edge. But as they reached the entrance of the safe house, a sense of temporary relief washed over him. The place was secure, a small, nondescript building that blended into its surroundings. Ava opened the door, revealing a modest interior with minimal furnishings. "This should be safe for now," she said, ushering them inside. "We'll need to keep a low profile and stay alert." Tevin helped NEA and Kiran settle into the safe house, his thoughts already racing ahead. The Dominion was relentless, and their pursuit was only going to get more intense. But for now, they had a moment to regroup and plan their next move. As he glanced around the safe house, he saw the same mix of exhaustion and hope in NEA's eyes that he felt within himself. They were in this together now, and whatever lay ahead, they had to face it head on. Tevin took a deep breath and turned to Ava. "All right, let's figure out our next move. The sooner we plan, the better our chances of staying ahead of the Dominion." Ava nodded, her expression resolute. "We'll make it through this, together." As the door closed behind them, sealing them off from the outside world, Tevin knew that whatever came next, they would face it with everything they had. The battle was far from over, but with Ava's help, they had a fighting chance.